Hello! Thank you for watching my video where I talk about a book I've read, a book review. This one's going to be different because I think it's the first time I don't recommend the book. Some background on the book, how I got a hold of it, what I know about it. It's an old book. It was published or copyrighted in 1992. It's Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus by John Gray. I first heard about this book when he was on Oprah Winfrey's show talking about his book and that subject matter, relationships, and how men and women are different. Then, I'm not sure which came first. I think I noticed it where somebody at my work brought it into work and left it out on a shelf. When something's left out on a shelf like that, it's obviously there for anyone to borrow. And then I was reminded of it again when I watched Regarding Men, the show on the channel Studio Brule on YouTube. This show Regarding Men is a show where three people talk about the news as it relates to men's rights and women's rights and feminism. Janice Fiamingo is the woman on the show. The other two people are men at the panel that meets via the internet. Paul Elam is one of them, and Tom Golden is the other. And one of them brought up this book, and I tried to find it again so I could be sure which one. I'm 99% sure it was Paul Elam, but maybe it was the other guy. He gave a very short and definitely negative review of the book. So Paul Elam says that book is worthless. It's a bad book. Alright, so then I decided I'm going to read it because it was there already. And I had got caught up in my other reading, finished my other reading. In the first chapter, the introduction chapter, I felt very tempted to give up on reading the book. Because John Gray let us know about an incident in his life. I guess we should appreciate him being willing to be open and share his weaknesses with us. But I'd rather get an advice book from somebody who already had their act together instead of somebody who was learning things they should have already known. So there was an incident that he talks about, and it was about a week, 5 days or a week after his wife had given birth. She ran out of pain medication, and he came home from work, and she was screaming and mad because, well, she was in pain and bemoaning her situation. He then took it personal and was getting ready to walk out of the room where she was, and she scolded him for being a fair weather friend. How do you not have patience for somebody in pain? How do you feel attacked if somebody's in pain and they're telling you they're in pain? I don't know. That's a really big character flaw, and I thought, wow, he was a jerk back then. Why should I read his book? But I'd already started reading it, and so I figured I might as well finish it. He also mentioned there that he said something about his first marriage. When you write something about a first marriage, then that lets me know he got married and divorced. Another example of how maybe not the best source of knowledge about this information. I usually want to read books about somebody who's been successful. When I read a hunting book, I want to read a hunting book from somebody who's actually done it. If I read a book about baseball, I would like to read about a book by somebody who got into the major leagues. whether it's a player or a coach or manager, something, instead of, somebody who never played it. Although you could get a lot of knowledge about sports from watching it, so maybe a book written by somebody who has watched a lot of it would still be useful. Anyway, two other times in the book, he talked about some things from his own life where he was not a good guy. One, he got mad at his wife when she was asking him when his flight was and checking it at a time. She was trying to help you. How do you get mad at somebody for trying to help you? That doesn't make any sense. And at one point in the book, he talked about how when he thought he and his wife were having good date nights because they went to the movies and she said okay. He says that he did notice that she was saying things about other places she would like to go, but then it would come around to whichever night of the week they would go out, and he would say, let's go to this movie, and she would say okay, but in the middle of the week they would drive by an opera house, and she would say, I want to see that opera. They would drive by a theater, and she would say, I want to see that theater. They would drive by a symphony, and she would say, it'd be nice to see that symphony. And he couldn't pick up on that hint. I pick up on hints. I bought my wife tickets to the Major League Baseball team around here. Because I picked up on the hints. My wife doesn't want to go to the opera or anything like that. So that's, for those reasons, he's not the best source of advice, I would say. Although, one of the things he wrote about is a common human reaction. It's not uncommon if you want something, you ask for something, you don't get it, for you to feel resentful and maybe even not want it. Like if later on somebody says, you wanted this, let's do it, let's have it, here's what the thing you wanted. And he did have that normal human reaction once. Alright, so let's talk about the book. The book's not pure evil. I'm not saying it's like, satanic. I'm just giving it a thumbs down. Better not read it. Find some other book. There are probably better books out there. But here's some facts about the book. The title is Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. Two completely different planets on opposite sides of the Earth. And that's one of the good parts about the book, is there are patterns and predominant manly and womanly mindsets and ways of doing things. There are people that break the mold, there are outliers, but when a big majority of any group does something, you can learn something about that group. In fact, we need to be able to look at what usually happens, or there's no point in learning anything. Let's see. So that's one good thing about the book. He uses a metaphorical story about Martians and Venusians meeting up, Martians flying all the way to Venus so they can spend time with the beautiful Venetians. Some of that's obviously metaphorical, because part of that is Martians spending hundreds of years without Venetians, and no human has spent hundreds of years without the opposite sex. One of the good things about the book is encourages you to find out what your real reasons are for your feelings you have, because sometimes you might be affected by something that happened long in your past, and you should not let that get in the way of your current life. Because the person you're married to now if they're not the one that did whatever it is to you in the past, they should not suffer for whatever that bad person did in the past to you. He does encourage communication, but I think you could get a better book that encourages communication. Um, he has a letter writing technique that he says he's got it to work with people. He says in his book that he is a psychologist who's actually had patients that he's helped, and their relationships have been helped. I'm, I don't see how, but maybe somebody did get some help out of his advice, but I don't see how. Okay. Even though there are predominant patterns in men and women, I don't think they're as predominant as some of the things he writes are as predominant as he writes them to be. If you compare what he describes women and men as, to me, I'm a woman. And the way he describes women is not the way my wife behaves. In fact, she got a little bit worried or scared at one moment when I asked her a question to try to understand her based on the book. And she was said something, asked, what was it, something like if she was getting grumpy or something. But I was just asking the question because I'm trying to understand how much she is like what the book described, but she's not. But she's a woman. So, the book excuses bad behavior too much. In the book's defense, towards the end, there is like one or two sentences that doesn't come right out and say people should behave better. But it does extremely weakly hint at, like, it'd be better if this advice weren't needed or something like that, better if people would behave better, but he's dealing with things as they are. Alright, so he gives grumpy women. This book gives more excuse for grumpy women than should be given. He does at least call out women for, well, instead of calling out women for using code language and telling them they're bad for getting mad if somebody doesn't understand a code language, if a woman says, we never have romance, she has absolutely zero right to demand her husband think that she said anything other than we have zero romance. But he was trying to excuse it and say, men need to learn the code. No, men don't need to learn any codes. Women need to speak clearly, like my wife does. And men shouldn't speak in codes either. My wife shouldn't have to try to figure out now, was it a hyperbole? No, my wife should be able to hear what I say and know, he said this, that's what he means. Maybe the most ridiculous thing he wrote in the book was that women, if they feel like they're doing everything and the husband's not contributing to the relationship, they need to pull back and do less. No, don't be a lazy bum. That's not going to get a man to want to be with you or be closer to you or give more to the relationship. Or am I an oddball? If I'm weird, feel free to tell me in the comments section, but I'm sure I'm not that weird on that. Men out there, do you want a woman who's being lazy? If your wife does nothing, is that going to make you say, ooh, she's doing nothing, she's not talking to me, she's not doing anything, I'm going to now get that relationship going? Or are you going to be like, well, she's not doing anything, why should I try or care about doing anything for the relationship? He seemed to excuse rich women who get grumpy. Rich women, your emotions, you don't have a right to be grumpy at everyone. So what else do you say about women? Excuse rich women, excuse them speaking in code. Okay. And then now, what he got wrong about men? is he excused grumpy men and men who do not want to talk. It's ridiculous. Just even if men don't want help with problems, if your wife is asking you for what you're feeling, you should tell her. If you're especially stressed about something, you should tell your wife. You shouldn't get grumpy at her if she's asking you questions. That shows she loves you if she asks you questions. Tell her why you're stressed. But according to him, men get to not tell their wife why they're stressed. Men get to just say, I can do it. I don't need help. And men get to get grumpy if they get advice. It is possible to go overboard and demand your advice be taken. I'm not condoning that. Women, if your man doesn't do every single thing you say, don't get mad at him. But, men, if your wife, wants to give you advice, hear her out. Don't get mad at her, like John Gray is encouraging you to do, or at least condoning. If he wasn't encouraging it, he was definitely condoning a man feeling offended if his wife wants to give advice or help him with something. He said men need their space. No, we don't. Okay, maybe if you have a business where you're working with your wife, it's good to get that little break. But if you go to work and you're not working with your wife, you get a break from each other when you go to work. You don't need to have space. And yeah, so other things he says about men, I don't remember now what it was. He said something like if you accept help, or if you're willing to talk to a woman, or if you never say no to her, that you're not using your masculinity, or you're not being masculine, and it's going to have long-term problems for the relationship. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. He's got some bad ideas about what it means to be masculine. Or at least he's not calling out men for being bad, and he's excusing grumpy behavior. Okay, and so one thing that he gets really wrong is claiming that men have a cycle. And it's like a rubber band. You need to stretch a rubber band, let it snap back, and we go in and out. Like our emotional availability, our ability to help with a family, our ability to know. See, he talks about men having a metaphorical cave. When he says go to their cave, he doesn't mean literal walking to a cave, but like mentally, you're just not there. And he excuses men for not being there emotionally and mentally for their family because they have something stressing them. If you're not at work, you should be at one. This is so sad because men have the ability to not think about something. There's a great book by Will Ferrell, and was it Pam Ferrell? Men are like waffles and women are like spaghetti. Everyone should get that book. Maybe I'll do a review of that book. I got that book. It's great. But men have the ability to compartmentalize things and only think about one thing at a time. So a man doesn't need to be stressing and thinking about something that's troubling him when he gets home from work. He should be there for his family. But John Gray says he gets to zone out and he needs to. He has an emotional cycle. No. Or am I weird in that way? Are you a man and you have an emotional cycle? You get a grumpy day every 4 days or something? No, there's no excuse for that. There is no manly cycle. Now, women do have cycles. And he's not wrong to say women have emotional cycles because the woman's menstrual cycle, get ready for some basic biology in case you didn't already know it. And feel free to pause or skip this or get your kids out of the room if they're really young and you don't want them to learn about the menstrual cycle. But it's a fact. Women have this cycle with their reproductive body parts. Once a month or once every 28 days, their body ejects an egg and some blood. And then a new egg takes the place. And then a month later, the new egg is the old egg that's going out. And along with those physical motions and physical liquids coming out of a woman, there are fluctuations in her hormones in her body. Now, women do have a cycle, but John Gray seemed to me to be excusing grumpiness and emotional detachment and inability or unwillingness to, like, be a nice person to the spouse, inability or unwillingness to get along with the spouse and the family during the more emotionally down times in the cycle. But women do not need to be grumpy with their husbands. Your husband did not give you that period. Your husband did not give you that emotional downtime. He shouldn't have to suffer through it. And I don't have to suffer through it. My wife's an example of a woman who does not get grumpy once or twice a month. I'm not saying my wife never gets grumpy, but you don't need to know embarrassing things about her. But my wife, she does not get grumpy constantly, and she does not get grumpy predictably based on her period, which is what John Gray was excusing. Okay. So, thank you for watching my review of the book that I saved you from torturing yourself with by me torturing myself with it. I read Men Are From Women, Men Are From Mars, and Women Are From Venus for you, so you can find out that it's not a good book. It's not pure evil. There were parts to it, but the good parts to the book you can find in other books that don't have the bad parts. And I'm disappointed this book turned out to be so disappointing, because the premise that men and women do have some differences is based on a fact. There are predominant differences between men and women. But anyway, have a good day. Thank you for watching.